Thank you, Mr. Teigen. Thank you for that powerful, powerful testimony. I'd now like to recognize Ranking Member Schrader, who's going to introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Howard Kunreuther, James G. Deenan, Professor of Decision Sciences and Public Policy at Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. In addition to his research, writing, and teaching, he's also been co-director of the Wharton Risk Management Decision Process Center, where he works on improving the roles of public and private sectors in reducing losses from natural disasters and aiding the recovery process following a catastrophic disaster. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Representative Schrader and Chairman Walsh and other members of the committee. Excuse me. I really appreciate the invitation to testify here on this particular bill. And I do want to make a point right at the outset that I'm very, very sympathetic to what Mr. Teig has said with respect to his challenges and problems that he faced. But I want to raise really 3 points in my testimony. The first is, why is the proposed legislation to extend SBA disaster loans at 1% to cover both disaster losses and other outstanding debts likely to increase future losses from natural disasters? Second, can we utilize other mechanisms like insurance coupled with policy tools to reduce future losses so that the SBA can play a secondary role in providing funds for disaster recovery? And there's no question SBA may have a role to play. How can the National Flood Insurance Program, which is now up for renewal and for discussion, be modified so as to set a tone as to ways that the public and private sectors can work together to reduce losses from floods and other disasters like storm surge from hurricanes? So those are the 3 points I'd like to emphasize. Let me talk about the first point and raise 2 issues, and I know that Dr. Mulhausen may be saying more about one of them, and so he'll probably elaborate on that. With respect to the SBA, the provision of 1% loan, it creates a moral hazard problem in the following sense. It encourages people to locate their home and businesses in hazard-prone areas while at the same time reducing the economic incentive to purchase insurance and invest in mitigation measures prior to a disaster. So we have to be aware of the fact that if you're going to get very low-interest loans, people may say, I don't need to necessarily be protected. The proposed program also has a potential of creating a situation where people actually may be better off after the disaster than before financially, and I recognize all the other problems that one faces. But if you get a 1% loan for retiring your old debts as well as your disaster losses, and I have an example in my testimony to highlight that, the actual payments would be lower than they were before the disaster if you had previous SBA loans. So I think that has to at least be considered. Let me move to the second point on the role of insurance and other policy tools to reduce future losses. Insurance has 3 basic purposes that it can actually aid in this process. One is it provides a signal of risk to individuals and firms in their current location. If you have premiums that reflect risk, then you will actually be able to know whether or not you have a very severe hazard. Second, it will encourage property owners to invest in loss-reducing measures. If you can get a premium discount, because you should if you invest in something that reduces your losses, then actually you may be in a position where you'll be encouraged to do so. And the third point is insurance supports economic resiliency. Insured individuals and firms can make a claim to obtain funds to help pay for the loss caused by the catastrophe. And I recognize that the flood insurance program may have to extend limits, which are one of the questions that I know would have to be raised. Let me give 2 guiding principles that has really reflected all of our work in this area with respect to insurance. Principle number 1 is that insurance premiums have to reflect risk for the reason that I've stated. So people have a signal of how hazardous it is, and they can invest in mitigation measures. Principle number 2 is just as important, and it's called equity and affordability. And when you have premiums that reflect risk, there may be people who need special treatment. They should not be given it by an insurance premium. They should be given by an insurance voucher, like a food voucher or a stamp. And the reason for that is that it enables one to still see what the premium is on the basis of the risk, and at the same time, they will have an opportunity to get a premium discount if they invest in mitigation measures. What we have been working with in Congress and would like to put forward is a few ideas for the National Flood Insurance Program reform that would actually try to move in that direction. The first is multi-year insurance, not tied to the individual, to the property, because people cancel their policies if they turn out that they have not imposed a claim. If they have not received a claim, they'll tend to cancel their policies. It's hard to convince people that the best return on an insurance policy is no return at all, that you should celebrate not having a loss. The second point is we would want insurance vouchers for those needing special treatment. Third, you may want to consider required insurance for property owners because there's so few people many people do not have their policies. And a fourth point is multi-year loans for mitigation. And if the mitigation measure to reduce the losses is a cost-effective one, the actual cost of the loan may be actually less than the premium reduction one receives, so it will be financially attractive for people to invest in mitigation. And finally, well-enforced building codes. Having said all of that, there certainly will be a role that the SBA will have to play after a disaster, but the emphasis should be to place more attention on reducing these losses beforehand. To conclude, our country has entered a new era of catastrophes. Our exposure is growing, and the damage from disasters over the next few years is likely to be more devastating than what we have experienced during this past decade. When the next catastrophe occurs, the Federal Government will very likely come to the rescue again. If the public's response to recent disasters is an indicator of their future behavior, new spending records will be spent with respect to Federal assistance unless steps are taken to reduce future losses, and they should be undertaken now. And so, with all due respect to all of the challenges after a disaster, I'd like to at least argue that we better try to do more to prevent these losses from occurring. Thank you very much.